All right, well, welcome back. We're back from the break. We are talking with Jared Hudson. And before we went on the break, we kind of went into a little segue into Covenant Rescue Group, which is really want to get into. Jared, can you tell us about Covenant? It's a topic that is, uh, I'm really interested in it because it's all about saving the children, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Long story short, Covenant Rescue Group, my wife and I started it in 2018. We got our 501(c)(3) status in 2019 and put our board of directors together. And we've really, until this last year, 2023, we're in 2024 now, obviously, but 2023 was our first year full time as an organization, I would say. But from 2018 until then, we were kind of what I would call a hand to mouth organization. We'd receive money, like get 60 grand, and say, hey, we can do two operations with 60 grand, and so we would try to do two operations, whether it be Indiana or New Mexico or wherever we were at, right, or Alabama. We try to do an operation. So we get money in, we do an operation, and it was just kind of a part-time volunteer gig for a lot of us. My wife and I, we used money that we had that other people had given us because they knew some of the work I was doing overseas and the human trafficking stuff. We used some of our own money. We used some money from friends that would donate, and that's kind of how we started it. And then we just kept, as people would hear about it, give some money, and we would go and do the op. We primarily looked at focusing on overseas human trafficking, but when COVID came, that really well, one, takes a lot of money to do stuff overseas. I'll give you a for instance. We're looking at working on a project in Zambia. I just got back from Zambia. We're looking at working on a project with Zambia. Been requested by their government to come in and work on this project with them, an anti-human trafficking project. Went over and met with all the governmental leaders there, the law enforcement agencies, told them what we need, did a few little undercover buys while we were there to see what type of operation we'd have to run. And, the ticket to do initially what they've asked, which is really just 3 weeks this year, is $350,000, right? So the ticket to do a stateside operation that is similar, stateside child exploitation sting, is $50,000. That's about the average. Sometimes they cost, I think, when we went out to New Mexico, it was like 86 grand. And we did one here locally that was like 37 grand. So the average that we've, run is about 50 grand for a stateside versus the average for an overseas operation is about $250,000, right? We're still supporting the Israeli initiative right now, and that's Israel, and then primarily the children in Palestine. So you got Arab kids, Israeli kids, Palestinian children. You got all of these. It's promoting or helping children that are displaced by war and at risk of being trafficked or are being trafficked or being stolen. Right now, with what we're doing, we got about $250,000 ticket on that. So overseas operations, you can see they cost more generally than stateside. So that was the first thing that the Lord was really shutting the doors on the overseas. It seemed like, because we just didn't have the funds to do it. And we were going over and doing some work, but we just didn't have the funds to do it. Then COVID happened. Totally killed our, going into Uganda, going into South Sudan, and all. They just killed all of those things because of how restrictive COVID was. And we stayed stateside, stayed here, and the Lord opened the doors for us to start working with local law enforcement agencies. I'm still sworn, and at the time I was sworn, many of our guys were, so that helped out. And what we would do is we would offer the agency, kind of like what we did in Henry County. They wanted a full-on SWAT course, so we cut it. Hey, we can pay for 50% if you pay for 50%, right, of a whatever $20,000, $25,000 course for all your guys. So what we did is we offered 1 or 2 days of training, generally speaking, at no cost for that agency, because 1 or 2 days we could cover the cost of that. And firearms, CQB, whatever you want. And we would do that with TSI for the agency, and that was kind of the hook. But we'll give you this free training for you and your guys if you will let us do our sex trafficking operations program, our child exploitation training, and then conduct a live sting with your agency. We've never been told no by any agency that's reached out or any agency we've told that to. Now the organization has grown to where we'll still offer the tactical training if they want it, but to be honest with you, like, no, y'all know what's going on. We want the sex trafficking operations program. We want the child exploitation sting, which is what we've been trying to get to. So, and when they go through that training, they get CEUs for law enforcement agencies. Some agencies, it's like, hey, we don't need CEUs, and some law enforcement say, hey, we really need our CEUs. So it's beneficial for them, and that's where the Lord really started honing, I guess, what we do. And our primary focus now, we do some overseas stuff, we do some rescues and things like that, but our primary focus with Covenant Rescue Group, or our bread and butter, as you would call it, or as I would call it, is child exploitation stings with a law enforcement agency. So we get individuals who are strictly buying or selling kids for sex, or primarily for sex. You got labor trafficking, you got all kinds of different things, but we're primarily targeting sex because we have laws in place at every state level that we can utilize that are felony charges. So that's the agency, but we also bring in the prosecutor's office on that. That's the other part of it. Wherever you're at, or like Virginia is a Commonwealth attorney, right? It's a CA instead of a DA, a district attorney. But whatever it is, whatever state you're in, most prosecutors have a county jurisdiction, or kind of like Alabama might have multiple counties in some areas, depending on which, circuit that you're in. So all of that being said, we partner with the agency, generally try to be the sheriff's office, but we partner with PD's work, but you got to sometimes go to the city council or the mayor to do that, which is not always beneficial. We partner with a local agency. We partner with a prosecutor. So we're not just making an arrest. And y'all know this as law enforcement agents. It's symbolism without substance. If I make an arrest and now we can't prosecute it because I did a poor job on the front end.
Right.
That's what all these vigilantes out there do, who are like, hey, I got this guy that wants to meet with a 14-year-old girl. Yeah, well, no one cares. You've done nothing unless you're showing up to kill the dude, kidnap him, and bury him in a hole somewhere. We don't do anything with it because you broke the law to get this guy. It's called entrapment, right? So what we do is we teach agencies how to engage these specific individuals. It's a very specific shot at those who are targeting kids. And not just engage them, but engage them in a way that it's not entrapment and we can prosecute it later. In the state of Alabama, there's 5 felony charges that falls under, depending on how you do it. One of which is, or 2 of which are human trafficking charges, human trafficking 1 or 2, which is 13A6, 152, and 153, I believe. But either way, the way that we do it is, we build a felony case on the front end. So when this individual shows up, we can make that, make that arrest and know that will be prosecuted. And right now we're 100% on our cases all over the nation. And some of them we're just waiting for sentencing on. The reason that's important is because if I arrest a guy who's showing up to have sex with a 13-year-old girl, 14-year-old girl, right? If we arrest and we're able to prosecute him, like we've got him dead to rights because this phone right here has everything we need on it, just kind of builds our case. A lot of times these individuals work with us because they're the ones who can tell you where to buy other kids. Generally speaking, in the U.S., it is we would look at it as being domestic in nature. It's a caretaker of the child, or it's a person of trust in a child's life who's selling them. And so then we can flip them and turn a sting into a rescue. And we do that. It's rare because it's hard to flip individuals, but you can do that. Or you take that phone, and as opposed to being like the FBI runs hashtags down forever, and they'll catch a guy, but they'll spend 4 years of a month of Sundays trying to find this dude who's doing child porn through these hashtags and all these different things, and it might wind up being nothing. These individuals that are showing up, one guy I can think of in particular, he was making videos of him having sex with his own 18-month-old daughter. His wife didn't even know it. His own flesh and blood. And so now that's where the federal side is able to get involved more easily, because you have a solid state case that the feds can then adopt, and you have a U.S. Attorney's Office, whether it's the USA or Assistant USA, that is able to then take that case and go with it federally. So now Now we get, kind of two sets with it. Does that make sense? And every state in the US, with exception of two, Washington being one of them, that I think of in particular, you have to actually do attempted rape of a child if they're showing up. But every state, with exception of two, has a solicitation of a minor for sexual purposes, or traveling meeting minor for, like, it has some form of it. And then some states like Alabama have a human trafficking charge where you can get the human trafficking attempt. And without talking about all that, we spend time studying the law, meeting with the appropriate people, making sure the prosecutors are good with this, and building a felony case. So when the law enforcement agency makes the arrest, they build a felony case. Why is that important? Because commonly, y'all tell me if y'all been in law enforcement a lot longer than I have, but what you see in law enforcement, generally speaking, when you hear human trafficking, is we'll set up a prostitution sting that we've been told is human trafficking because this woman's being sold for sex, even though I've never met one who's been sold for sex. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying in the thousands we've met, they've always been selling themselves, or their
Right.
boyfriend was just complicit in it. I've never seen a chick actually being sold like that stateside. I've seen a few overseas, but even overseas, it's not like, oftentimes what we think. An of-age woman being sold for sex, that's a misdemeanor charge. Well, that's what we're using as our probable cause to then look for drugs, certain persons forbidden, whatever it is, right? Felon with a warrant shows up. So you're using a misdemeanor charge to hopefully build a felony case on the back end. That is generally what we saw with law enforcement. That's a waste of valuable resources, in my opinion, to something that it might be human trafficking, but then again, it might not be. Child exploitation is always human trafficking by definition and by letter of the law. So we already know as an organization, we're being good stewards with what God has given us with our money by strictly looking at child exploitation, because we know 100% of the time that's human trafficking. And by the definition of our organization with the IRS, we have to combat or target human trafficking, right? So that covers us, and our board's good with that, and it should be. That's us being good stewards. We strictly target child exploitation because it's always human trafficking. We don't have to worry about the guessing. Is it human trafficking or is it not? And then on the other side of it, for the law enforcement agency, we're building a felony case at the front end, and not just a felony case, a good felony case. We're building a good felony case at the front end so that the agency makes a solid arrest and the prosecutor's like, holy crap, yeah, this is bang up. We can do this. And they wind up going to court, going to grand jury, and then, I mean, again, if it gets true billed, then you're just waiting on sentencing.
Mhm.
So that's kind of our program in a nutshell.
Let me ask you this, and I'm watching Thomas write down a book over here, so I know he's got a lot of questions on this. Now, Andy and I understand the law enforcement side of it, and having worked the investigative side of things, I worked a few cases where, kids were involved. My question to you is, you don't really think, you think human trafficking, you think, okay, it's coming across the border, it's out of Mexico, it's out of South America, it's overseas, what have you. How prevalent is the human, and I want my listeners to hear this from you, how prevalent is the human trafficking, especially the sex trafficking of children in the U.S.?
Oh, let's put it this way. Well, this is a statistic I was told by, and I've been saying FBI, but the guy was actually ATF, but he said he got it from the FBI when he worked as he's retired. I talked with him the other day. He believes it's more than this, but the statistic he would say is for every individual that you arrest who's showing up to have sex with a child, and they didn't actually do it, right? Decoy-based operation, something to have sex with a child. That's 25 lives that they would have impacted, that you just nipped in the bud and kept them from impacting.
25.
Well, 25 lives. We made 87 felony arrests across the nation last year in 9 operations. So we averaged 10 arrests per operation. So look at the amount of kids that would have been impacted strictly by our small organization, working on 9 separate operations with a total of about, an average of 3 agencies per operation normally, a federal agency, a local agency, and the prosecutor's office. Well, dude, there are 3,100 sheriff's offices in the nation, a little bit less than 3,100 sheriff's offices in the nation. we ain't even scratching the surface. And I've never been in a place, again, to average 10, and this isn't just in Alabama, this is nationwide, to average it where average 10 arrests. And these are individuals who are strictly targeting children. Dude, I would say that the problem is beyond what any of us could comprehend. And it's more than just, we think child being stolen and sold. It's like I watched this on Netflix the other night with my wife. That it's called American Nightmare, I think. About the girl out in California. Her and her husband, or her and her boyfriend, were tied up in their house. She was taken. Y'all know the story I'm talking about. I vaguely remembered it as I'm listening. It's talking about nationwide, and then they started calling her a fake and a phony, even though she was taken, she was raped, and then she was released. They wound up catching the guy. Now, the family has been, for lack of a better word, vindicated, I guess, because she really was taken. This guy, but all law enforcement did was they looked at them, the FBI, who sucks at everything they do. Yeah, and I'm saying it, and they can hear it, right?
You can
And I
say
got a lot of
whatever you want to on this show.
that's right. There you go.
So
And here's the thing. I got a lot of buddies in the FBI. I got a lot of buddies that left the FBI recently because of certain issues. But you had the FBI that strictly wanted to look at these two people for crying wolf, right? Calling a fake. And then you've got the local agencies doing the same thing. I think they were sued and they lost. But this is a great example, though, in defense of these organizations, of the FBI, the local agencies that support us. The story was so out there compared to what we normally see as law enforcement agents that it did not make sense from what we normally see, right? It's so rare. And so that's what I would argue, is that there is truth to that. It is so rare that we see somebody taken in that manner, the free candy van taking a kid. It doesn't mean that it does not happen. It just means that it's so rare. What are we missing? Well, we're missing our ability to target. You see, it's not that the agencies, and it's not that we as law enforcement agencies don't actually have the knowledge of how to do it. We do. We have the knowledge of how to do it. We have all the tools, no matter how big or small the agency. But it's the order of operations. I don't know if y'all do math or good at math or anything, but you got, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Y'all remember that? Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. The order of operations. And you like that?
Hey there, I just wanted to take a second to say thank you so much for watching this episode of The Shepherd Station. If you feel this has added some value to your life, it would mean so much to us if you would share this episode with someone else. It helps us so much when you do that. It would go a long way in supporting our mission to help men become better fathers, husbands, and leaders. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and give us a like. If you're listening to us through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to podcasts, follow us, leave us a review, and let us know how we're doing. We want to hear from you. All right, that's all I've got. Now, let's get back to the episode.
If I can get any portion of the problem right, but if I get it out of order, my answer at the end will be wrong. And oftentimes what we see with law enforcement agencies, especially local law enforcement agencies, or the bigger vision, the feds at the higher level, the big vision, the overall, a lot of times what we see is we just get the order of operations wrong. And that's why we get the answer wrong at the end. We don't have a successful prosecution, or we don't actually get the guy, or we miss the times when people are stolen, like the lady out in California. So that's what we try to do, is make sure that we see, or we get these are your tools. This is the order they have to go in for the successful felony case, or an arrest that leads to a successful prosecution. Number one. But number two, we want to make sure that agency also knows that this is human trafficking. Oh, by the way, no matter what every bleeding heart out there tells you, this is not human trafficking. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of my long-winded Southern Baptist answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of sounds like to me like you guys are trying to know the unknowns, right? In a sense, sometimes like with that, you have to sort of know, because like in that you have your order of operations you're talking about, but then there are things that can happen that you didn't know about, right? Or like that was just completely a rare case, something that just pops up out of nowhere. Like Chris Voss talks about a black swan, right? Have you ever I'm
Yeah.
sure this is the well, he
Go
was
ahead.
a
Yeah.
negotiator at the FBI. He wrote a book called Never. The only reason I know this,
Right.
I just got finished reading this book. Okay, that like yesterday. That's the only reason I even know this because I am not military,
Yeah.
law enforcement, any of that kind of thing minded. But he talks about like black swans, which are it comes from that. You know what I'm talking
Yeah, a
about?
black swan, it's an anomaly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that just doesn't happen very often.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in that, you have to change your mindset to say, well, am I going to think about the unknown, try to know what the unknowns are and navigate in order that I see those things whenever they come out? Is that kind of what you're talking about? Like you guys had to kind
Yeah.
of orient yourself or?
It is a little bit. So with what you're saying, like I haven't read that book, but I know what you're talking about. And I know the concept that was presented in that. With that being said, that is part of it. I would say law enforcement agencies it might be that black swan principle or whatever you want to call it that exists a lot of times within a law enforcement agency. A great example, and I know he won't mind me saying it. Eric Blankenship with Houston County told me at the end of the operation we did, he said, "Bro, we got one hotel in this county. I thought we'd be lucky if we arrested one guy. I didn't think we'd get anybody. We got 6 in 2 nights, and we probably could have gotten more, but again, it's always a learning piece. So I really think it's less of that a real black swan of it being an anomaly, and it's just an anomaly. Listen to me trying to talk, sound like an idiot. I know big words.
That was a good one.
It's the what?
So that came
Yeah.
from me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Pulled that one right out of the air.
But it's less of that, and it's just more of it's a black swan to us. Does that make sense? I don't know
Oh,
if
I
that
see what you're saying. Yeah.
it's not that it really is a black swan. It's just that it's that to us. It's like the case I was just talking about with that grown woman. Dude, they had like 15 cases at the end of this show that you watch. You know how true it is. You know, who knows? I vaguely remember it when it happened. But they had like 15 cases over like a 3 or 4 year period that nobody addressed. That was this guy that they wound up arresting and admitting to all these cases. So it wasn't that it was really a black swan thing. It was just it was an anomaly to the law enforcement agency. And so that's what we're trying to do is remove that being the anomaly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
just,
sense.
Just because law enforcement doesn't know about it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Right.
You know,
There you go.
that comes through intelligence. If you got a good intelligence, if you got a good intelligence base, and you've got good informants, and you've got good people that your analyst or analyze not only intelligence that you gather and disseminate, but intelligence that other people gather and disseminate also, then you're going to know more, of course. You know.
Yeah. In that same vein, can I ask a question? Another question?
Out. Got a whole page of it.
I don't know if this is really we want to talk about like, what you do and what all goes behind that and what your thoughts are on how you even got into that thinking like I'm going to go save children from child exploitation. Can you start there? And then I got another question right after that.
Man, if I'm being honest, that was never, human trafficking was it. We started the organization for human trafficking, and the Lord just opened the doors and kind of guided or directed us, I guess. We were stepping, right? The Lord will direct your footsteps, or he'll light your path. And that's kind of what he did. It was just kind of by sheer sovereign design, I guess, that we fell into this. And the main reason was because I worked enough overseas prostitution stings, as I would call them, and worked enough stateside prostitution stuff to say that there might be human trafficking in this prostitution thing or in this sex work field. But man, it's a lot rarer than people make out. And then when girls would get taken, it's like, we got a Nye's law in the state of Alabama, right? That young lady at Nye who was taken, like when she was taken, she wound up being killed, right? But man, there were between her family and law enforcement agencies, they were burning the Southeast down looking for this girl. There was a little girl, a child, Cupcake, who was taken. I don't know if y'all remember hearing about that. And Jefferson County is a Birmingham, found her over here in the Mount Olive landfill. She was dead, but they literally burned the Southeast down to find this little girl. Every federal, there was a child that went missing up in not long ago, maybe 8 months ago, and where was it at? In Walker County, I think. A baby that went missing, and every federal agency and local agency are looking for this child. They found the child in a car rolled down into a kudzu patch where, I guess one of the parents, drug situation, all that. The child was fine. But we are, as a whole, our system, at least in the US, is really good at when somebody goes missing like that, finding them. The hard part where we're not as good at, and it's not anybody's fault, is when somebody who doesn't have a family, I hate to say a family that loves them, but they're in the state system. You got these kids that run away, and you got people who are out there on there. That's where you run into that larger risk. And I apologize, I just rambled on for a bunch of
No,
stuff.
that's good. That's good.
What specifically did you ask?
No, that was no, you answered what I was asking, just like how you got into it, why you started doing that, and you went into even more than that, which is great. My other question,
But with us, when we see it, it's child. It was like, okay, anytime you deal with children, all of this stuff you look at, we're really good at finding people who go missing, especially people who are, part of a family. Whether we find them alive or dead, but we're good at targeting children. However, they're the ones at the most risk of actually being trafficked. That's why we got into child exploitation.
which that's a really interesting statistic, because I don't know, maybe it's just me, my whole life thinking about that, like what human trafficking is. For some reason, maybe it's because of the media and entertainment industry or whatever, but I don't think of child. Like, I don't immediately just go, yeah, that's mostly children. I think, no, women that are older that are being trafficked, and so I think, I don't know if I'm a good representation of the majority of people, but maybe that's what most people think. But you're saying it's the opposite. There aren't as many. It's more so.
I think that's going
children.
to come down to, okay, it's like Jared saying, having worked prostitution stings, and Andy, you can attest to this because you've worked a
Yep.
bunch of them. You find that the women in those in that scenario, they're a willing participant.
Right.
So you can't really necessarily call it a human trafficking thing. Now
Right.
they may have what you would
Yeah.
refer to as a pimp or whatever the case
Mhm.
is, but it's more often than not they're going to be a willing participant in it.
Right.
So I don't look at it like that now. And I
It's
am
kind of
different
like-
because I have seen the other
Yeah.
side of it, not to the degree that you have, Jared. And with what my wife did, Erica, that was what she was tasked with when she was working investigations, is she was working the child exploitation cases.
Hmm.
So we kind of have a different, outlook on it.
Yeah.
And see how much that it does go on. Believe it or not, especially in this county, it's
Right.
a lot more than you think. What worries me is, and the kind of the statistics I wanted to get from you, Jared, was overall, how prevalent is that where children are being targeted, especially when you have these organizations that's what they're doing to make money.
Well, I would ask you a question with this, since you came from that background, or your wife at least did work in child exploitation. How many cases did y'all work where it wasn't, familiar, right? Where it wasn't family involvement in some way? How many of those cases was there where it wasn't family or known involvement? Like that the child knows this person.
Right.
Personally involved in none.
Yeah.
They were always family. It was
Always.
No, back that up. It was always family. It was always somebody that they knew had, like you said, that personal involvement with. I know that the cases that she worked, because obviously she's going to tell me about them. It was always going to be either a family member, like you just said, or somebody that they knew that was that close with their family. So,
And so for us, that's what we see 100% of the time. And this is overseas too, by the way, guys. Except in war-torn countries. Anytime there's war, it's different. It looks different. That's just the nature of war, right? But even the cartels, all this stuff, kids being stolen, most of the time, it starts with family in some shape, form, fashion. Now, there might be something driving the family. It might be poverty, right? That's probably the prime thing, poverty, people being impoverished.
even with cartel involvement, you're still seeing a lot of family.
Well, so it's not not all the time, but it's not always strong arming like everybody thinks. Somebody just come in, strong arm people, take them. I would say that's more war torn areas. It is we literally have nothing, and someone comes in and says, I will, uh, I will take your child. I will get them to America. You just have to pay me however much you have. And people are paying for somebody to take their kids, not knowing that there's nefarious intent. They think they're doing what's better for their kids. So they're selling, or they're paying for somebody to take their kids. And we see that now. We see that in Africa all the time, all over, in countries all over Africa. The Muslim Brotherhood, I believe it's the Muslim Brotherhood that does it primarily, but these girls get sold into Hezbollah and Hamas and
They're
all these guys.
selling the kids thinking they're doing the right thing, trying to help their children, to organizations that do have nefarious intent.
It's very rare. It's very rare, even internationally. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does, but it's very rare that somebody comes in, kills a dad, kills a mama, physically takes the kids and sells them, or steals those kids and sells them. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen. One case that, and I didn't work on this, a buddy of mine that worked it told me about it. A husband and wife, it's in Mexico, husband and wife were going around, and some lady, I forgot what it was, somehow some lady took their baby out of a stroller, right? And they are freaking out, looking all day, and either the next day or later on that day, she sees a lady carrying a baby, and she sees it. She says, "That's my baby. That's my baby." Well, the woman that stole the baby was dead. They had pulled all the stuff out of the inside of the baby and stuffed the skin of the baby, the whatever, with drugs, and they were using the baby to mule drugs. So again, that was a story I was told. I didn't personally witness that, but I do know that those things happen overseas. However, for the most part, again, if we're looking at what happens most of the time, and especially in the U.S., somehow it's family involvement. One of the girls we rescued, partnered with an agency up in Michigan, a little girl, I think she was 14 at the time. Her parents were split up. Her dad and brother were physically abusing her. They lived about 2 miles down the road where she was locked in a cage at. Her mom and her mom's boyfriend were sexually abusing her, and her mom was in jail in Texas, and she didn't want to stay with her mom's boyfriend. So she had nowhere to go. She ran away, got picked up by a dude on the street, 22-year-old dude. He starts, sleeping with her, so a little live-in girlfriend, and then starts selling her, making money. He was slinging dope, and we found her. She's locked in a cage in the backyard. And any time during the day that somebody would come over, he'd lock her in the cage so they couldn't find her, and he would let her out. Well, for all intents and purposes, that for her was a choice of she had places to go, but for her, that was better than the other places she had to go. So I'm not saying that even when, and she was underage, but a lot of women that are grown up that we see working sex work, that we were talking about a little bit earlier, a lot of times they're there willingly, but they might have been, most of them actually have experienced this, whether through family when they were younger. So there is a driving force to it. So for us, we just see that, hey, if I'm gonna cut the head off the beast, it's got to start at child exploitation. And that's why we focus primarily on that. It is family-based stateside.
I'm guessing you see a lot of the grooming. I mean, that's where a lot of this winds up at. A lot of girls are groomed. They, like you said earlier, they don't have a very good family life. They don't have anybody. They don't have a man in the house that's a real man. That's a real leader. That's taking care of his family, and they've got a family life that's bad, and then they're looking for love outside that family somewhere, and then they find it with that guy that, like you said, he dates her and treats her real nice and continues to groom her, and then he starts requiring her to sleep with other men for money. And at that point, then they're saying, well, I'm going to put these sex videos of you out on the internet, if you try to leave, or, we're going to kill your younger sister, or we're going to or whatever.
Or they have a child, that's hold that over their head. So that is a fair assessment. And then I would even say on the grooming side, a lot of times these children are being groomed, and the person grooming them doesn't even know they're grooming them. It's just more conditioning. Does that make sense? Because this happened to me. All that this what they know. It's not a big deal to them. We see that. I saw that in Zambia a good bit just this last trip we took over there. It's almost offensive when you look at somebody, hey, is anybody selling you? Is anybody taking you? Doesn't matter if they're a child or if they're an adult. They almost like take offense that you would say that. No, nobody's doing that. This is what I do, but they've been conditioned that this is okay because of maybe what happened to them when they were younger. So,
Yeah.
so yes,
And
I would say that's a fair assessment.
yeah, that's really interesting. And we're running low on time, so I want to make sure that we get everything in that we want to get in. But here's something I feel like we really need to make sure people know. What is the most important thing that you would say people need to know about child exploitation?
Well, it's always human trafficking. Everybody talks about human trafficking, wanting to fight it. Anytime a child is exploited, anytime a child's exploited, it is, there's some words again. Alabama guys up.
There's that South Alabama.
Right, down there in LA.
That's right.
So, no, anytime a child is exploited, it is human trafficking. By the definition of human trafficking, hey, and we're in the state of Alabama, by the letter of our state law, it is human trafficking. So that's what I try to tell people, because a lot of people don't they don't view it that way. Again, they think more of what probably you were thinking about. So you want to end human trafficking? That's how you end it. You deal with child exploitation.
Look at it from
know-
a different level. I'm sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, good. Jared, the first case made under the human trafficking statute, the state human trafficking statute, was made in Dothan. And it was actually a girl who had been trafficked over from maybe Texas to Mississippi. And then she was in a hotel room in Dothan, and she ended up getting away. And Dothan PD ended up arresting that guy. I think he got about 30 years under the new statute. But that was the first case made in the state.
How old was she? You remember?
I think she was around 17 or 18 years old.
So,
That's my recollection. But, I think especially child sex trafficking, is one of the most demonic things that I've ever seen. I mean, people talking about this as criminal in nature and all. Yes, it's criminal in nature due to the letter of the law, but this is demonic influence.
100%.
Is what is causing this. And some people don't believe in demons on earth, but there are things that are on this earth and people on this earth that are Satan incarnate here on earth. And I think that child sex trafficking is just one of the most horrendous, most demonic things I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And one thing I want you to speak about, Jared, is you tend to see a lot of former special ops guys that get into the human trafficking realm. I was up in Indiana back in October with Craig Sawyer for a couple of days. Got to hang around with him and talk to him.
Old Saw man.
Yeah, I got to hang around with him for a couple of days up there. We were both speaking at an event. Got to hear about some of the stuff that they're doing there. I've talked to Jeff Teagues before. Jeff was former lieutenant colonel with Delta, and he works with Victor Marks. I've talked to Jeff a couple of times on the phone about some training and stuff also. But you see special ops guys gravitate to this, and I think a lot of it is due to they're trying to break down the same type networks that terrorism also, the same model of terrorism overseas also relates back to the human sex trafficking operations here in the United States and internationally also.
No, yeah, I mean, I totally, and I think the reason special operations guys kind of go toward this, we do have a set of skill sets, albeit it doesn't support us in stateside law enforcement because, again, you've got to have a prosecutable case unless you're willing to freaking tag and bag these dudes and bury them in a quarry somewhere, right?
Okay.
Which, if you're not willing to go that far, then you've got to be able to prosecute them. So I will say the special operations community has struggled building solid cases here. However, we have a skill set that we've learned over years at war, targeting specific terrorists, finding people that we can utilize to find kids, target these terrorists, for lack of a better word, that are going after these kids. And I think that's why you see that that draw, I guess, to this from the special operations community, is because it's a good way to utilize our skills if we can get into it and support it.
Yeah.
That's good.
So-
We're gonna sort of wrap it up. Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Jared,
Yeah, go ahead.
and there's so many more things that I want to talk about.
I know.
I hope we'd
We'll
love to
get you
have you
back on
back on the
sometime,
show.
too.
Yeah.
Maybe next time we do it, or if we got some stuff coming up in Dothan, I think more in the spring, maybe when we're down that way, we just get a time where I can come sit in the studio.
That'd be
Sure.
awesome.
Be
Hey,
great.
listen, you and I talked the other day, getting you set up to come on the show. You wanted to put a plug in for some stuff you were doing. Did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, which well, a plug for which is Covenant Rescue Group. If I talk about Covenant Rescue Group, Right now, of course, obviously we're a nonprofit. We work on, funding from different organizations, different individuals, and then obviously, grants and all that kind of stuff. So we got that whole process. We are a 501c3 organization that gives a, tax donation or tax thing from the IRS at the end of the year. With that being said, it's $50,000 per operation. So if we come to, Dothan, Alabama, do an operation, it's about 50 grand to pull that off for our team. That's a sting. That's what I talked about primarily in this podcast, our bread and butter. A rescue operation, which would be more the sex work side, the prostitution. I don't believe on the criminal side of that. We just get advocates in front of these ladies to hopefully present the Holy Spirit and the gospel and hopefully give them an opportunity to get out of that line of work. Those cost $15,000. We're trying to pull one of those off a quarter with some of our partners. So for those operations, 15 grand. We got $250,000 in Israel that we're looking to fulfill throughout this year, and we're looking to do 350,000 for Zambia. I say all that to say we have one operation a month. Some months we have two. One operation a month, basically from now to January 2025. So we have a $2.5 million budget. That's the main plug I want to give. If you're listening to this, or you have any people that you know that can or want to support in any way, we are doing real work, and we need your help and support. And you can go to covenantrescue.org. To learn more about us, to donate, to follow us, pray for us every day, because we definitely need it. And the other thing, my company, the Shooting Institute, I, again, primarily do government work, but if anybody wants to reach out to us on the Shooting Institute, train or anything like that, more than happy to get with you. But that's outside of Covenant Rescue Group. The last thing, I send it to you. You can send it out to your folks. I'll be speaking the armor of God through the eyes of a Navy SEAL. We didn't even get to talk about that today.
I wanted to get that. I did.
Yeah. So, I'll be speaking on that at Gardendale First Baptist Church. You can purchase tickets to it, to the dinner, and like you get a ticket, gets you a raffle, a couple cool raffle items. But I'll be speaking 7 to 8, and that's free. That doesn't cost anything. 7 to 8 at Gardendale First Baptist Church.
What's the date on that, Jared?
February 24th. So a couple weeks from now, it's a Saturday evening. Anybody wants to go out, you're going to hear a gospel presentation. I think y'all probably learned that about me. You're going to hear about Jesus Christ. It's not about Jared Hudson. However, I'm going to be utilizing what we did in the SEAL teams, what I did in the SEAL teams, to present the armor of God in a modernized fashion, I guess, right? As opposed to the Roman centurion, we're looking at the Navy SEAL. So
that's great.
Well, cool. Got anything else, Andy?
Hey, I'm good, man.
Man, this is awesome. I love
like I said,
to you.
Did you at least get 2 podcasts out of this?
I think when they get
so.
2, if you agree to come back at a later date, we can get even more.
We got to hear.
All right, that's fine. Yeah.
So, I really appreciate you coming on. Outstanding man of faith. You got an amazing testimony. You've got an amazing story. You're doing some great stuff. My prayers will be with you with Covenant Rescue Group. Continue the mission, man. Keep fighting. So,
man, I appreciate it.
With that, can I ask you if you will close us out in a word of prayer?
And more than happy to. Lord Jesus, we love you. We praise you. I thank you for the men in this room right now. I just ask, God, that you would be with each and every one of us. You say where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, you'll be in the midst of them, and you're right here in the midst of us, God. And we pray that with all the stuff we talked about, that someone would come to know you through our words and actions, that we would only give you the honor and the glory out of everything that we do, and that it would be about you and you crucified and not about us. I pray for the businesses that are being run here, whether it's in the tactical world, in the restaurant world, or whatever it is podcast world. I pray that you would grow this podcast and let people come to know you through it, God. I pray for the physical elements here, God, whether it's things that are going to lead to medical retirement or have led to medical retirement, all of the stuff that you know is going on, God. You are Jehovah Rapha, the mighty healer. You are Lord, our provider, and I ask that you would provide an amazing way in everybody's lives, and that it won't be so we can just get the glory for it or so that we can live a cushy life, but it will be that you get the glory and that people around us see who you are, that you are the great I am. We love you, Jesus. We praise you. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks for joining us today, folks. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Jared.